Marcus Williams never imagined that floating peacefully in his own backyard pool on a Saturday afternoon would land him in handcuffs. But then again, he'd never met Deborah Patterson. Though the neighborhood had plenty of stories about the woman, everyone called Karen. The Arizona sun blazed overhead as Marcus adjusted his floating chair, letting the cool, chlorinated water lap against his dark skin. At 32, he'd worked his ass off to afford this modest 3-bedroom house in Scottsdale's Willowbrook subdivision. The pool had been his dream feature, not Olympic-sized, but perfect for unwinding after 60-hour weeks managing IT systems at a downtown hospital. He'd saved for 3 years to make it happen, and every penny had been worth it. His phone buzzed, with a text from his girlfriend, Sarah. "Still coming over at 4? Bringing steaks for the grill." Marcus smiled, checking the time. 2:30 p.m. Perfect. He had 90 minutes to soak up some vitamin D before she arrived for their weekly pool date. The peaceful moment shattered like glass against concrete. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" The voice cut through the suburban tranquility like a buzzsaw. Marcus nearly capsized his float, spinning toward the sound. A white woman in her 50s stood at his back gate, somehow inside his fenced yard, pointing at him with the fury of someone who'd discovered a burglar rifling through her jewelry box. She was exactly what Central Casting would order for an angry suburban mom: blonde highlights growing out to gray roots, yoga pants that had never seen a yoga studio, and a face twisted into an expression of righteous indignation. A small white dog yapped frantically at her feet, straining against a rhinestone leash. "I'm sorry, what?" Marcus called out, genuinely confused. He paddled his float toward the pool's edge, wondering if he was having some kind of heat-induced hallucination. "Don't play dumb with me," the woman snapped, stepping further into his yard. "I know exactly what you're doing here, and I've already called the police." Marcus's blood went cold despite the 90-degree heat. "Called the police? Ma'am, I think there's been some kind of mistake." "The only mistake was you thinking—" "You could get away with this," she interrupted, pulling out her phone. "Yes, hello. I'd like to report a break-in in progress. There's a suspicious black male in the backyard pool at 1247 Sagebrush Lane. He's clearly trespassing, and I'm concerned for the safety of the neighborhood children." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. This was his address, his pool, his house, his life. And this stranger was describing him like he was some kind of predator. "Ma'am, please hang up the phone," Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice level as he climbed out of the pool. Water streamed from his swim trunks as he reached for the towel draped over a nearby chair. "This is my house. I live here." Deborah, though he didn't know her name yet, let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Your house? Right. Do you have any idea how much homes cost in this neighborhood? There's no way you could afford to live here." The casual racism hit him like a slap. Marcus had dealt with assumptions about his economic status before, but never this blatantly, never, with such venom. He took a slow breath, reminding himself that getting angry would only make things worse. "I can show you my driver's license," he offered, moving slowly toward the patio table where he'd left his wallet. "It has this address on it." "Don't move!" Deborah shrieked, backing toward the gate. "I've seen enough news reports to know how this works. You probably stole that ID from the real homeowner." Marcus froze, his hands visible and empty. The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so terrifying. Here he was, standing dripping wet in his own backyard, being treated like a criminal by someone who had literally trespassed onto his property. "Ma'am, please," he started. "And another thing," Deborah continued, her voice rising to a pitch that probably had dogs howling 3 blocks away. "Even if you do live here, which I doubt, you're being way too loud. My princess hasn't been able to nap all afternoon because of your splashing." Marcus stared at her, then at the tiny dog that hadn't stopped barking since she'd arrived. The irony was so thick he could choke on it. In the distance, sirens began to wail. The sirens that had been wailing in the distance were now pulling into Marcus's driveway. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing red and blue against the desert afternoon. Marcus felt his heart hammering against His ribs as he stood there in his swim trunks, water still dripping from his hair, watching his perfect Saturday transform into a nightmare. "Thank God you're here!" Deborah Patterson called out as two officers approached the backyard gate. She had positioned herself strategically by the entrance, Princess still yapping at her feet like a furry alarm system. "I caught him red-handed." Officer Mike Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran of the Scottsdale Police Department, took in the scene with practiced eyes. His partner, rookie officer Jenny Walsh, had her hand resting near her radio. Rodriguez had responded to enough domestics, disputes and neighborhood conflicts to recognize the smell of bullshit from 50 yards away, and something about this call stank to high heaven. "Ma'am, you reported a break-in?" Rodriguez asked Deborah, pulling out his notepad. "Exactly. This man," she pointed dramatically at Marcus, "was trespassing in the Hendersons' backyard pool. I know for a fact they're in Europe for 3 weeks. I've been keeping an eye on their house, and I caught this criminal taking advantage of their absence." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "The Hendersons?" "Officer, there's been a serious misunderstanding," he said, keeping his voice calm and his hands visible. "My name is Marcus Williams. This is my house. I live at 1247 Sagebrush Lane." Rodriguez looked at the house number on the gate, then back at Marcus. "Can you provide some identification, sir?" "Yes, absolutely. My wallet is on the patio table right there." Marcus gestured slowly toward the table. "May I retrieve it?" "Go ahead, but move slowly," Rodriguez instructed. As Marcus walked to get his wallet, Deborah's voice rose to a fever pitch. "You're not seriously buying this act, are you? I've lived in this neighborhood for 8 years. I know every single family on this block. The Hendersons are an elderly white couple, Harold and Margaret. They would never, there's just no way." She caught herself before finishing the sentence, but everyone heard what she'd almost said. Marcus returned with his wallet, hands shaking slightly as he pulled out his driver's license. "Here's my ID and here's my mortgage statement that came yesterday." He handed both documents to Officer Rodriguez. The officer examined them carefully. "License, Marcus Williams, 1247, Sagebrush Lane, Scottsdale, AZ. Mortgage statement, same name, same address, payment current." He looked up at Marcus, then at Deborah, whose face was turning an interesting shade of red. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said to Deborah, "this gentleman appears to live here legitimately. Can you explain why you thought he was trespassing?" Because, Deborah sputtered. "I've never seen him before, and the Hendersons—" "Live at 1249 Sagebrush Lane," Marcus interrupted quietly. "Next door, the blue house with the rose garden. Harold waves at me every morning when I leave for work." Officer Walsh consulted her tablet. "Sir, our records show Marcus Williams as the registered owner of 1247 Sagebrush Lane, purchased 18 months ago." She looked at Deborah with barely concealed irritation. "Ma'am, did you enter this man's property without permission?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Deborah's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I was just... The gate was unlocked and I heard splashing and I thought..." "So you did enter his property without permission," Rodriguez stated. It wasn't a question. "This is ridiculous," Deborah exploded. "I was trying to protect the neighborhood. I've never seen this man before, and you can't be too careful these days. Do you know what kind of people are moving into our neighborhood?" The racist subtext wasn't subtext anymore. Officer Walsh stepped forward, her jaw tight. "Ma'am, I need you to step back. You've admitted to unlawful entry onto private property." "Unlawful entry? I was being a good neighbor. Someone needs to keep an eye on things around here." Deborah's voice cracked with indignation. Marcus watched the scene unfold with a mixture of vindication and exhaustion. He'd known this moment would come eventually, not the specific moment, but something like it. The moment when his presence in a nice neighborhood would be questioned, when someone would decide he didn't belong. "Officers," Marcus said quietly, "I appreciate you sorting this out, but I'd like to know what happens next. This woman trespassed on my property, made false accusations, and wasted police resources because she didn't think I looked like I belonged here." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Mr. Williams, you have every right to press charges for criminal trespass. Ma'am, He turned. To Deborah. You're going to need to come with us. Come with you? For what? I didn't do anything wrong. Deborah's voice reached a pitch that made Princess howl. Criminal trespass, filing a false police report, and disturbing the peace, Officer Walsh recited. You have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda rights echoed across the suburban afternoon, Marcus realized his neighbors were starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Some looked confused, others embarrassed. A few were recording with their phones. His girlfriend Sarah's car pulled into the driveway just as Officer Walsh was placing hand. Sarah dropped her grocery bag on the driveway, stakes forgotten as she took in the surreal scene. Her boyfriend stood in his swim trunks next to two police officers, while a middle-aged white woman was being led away in handcuffs, screaming about property values and knowing her rights. That woman, Marcus explained as Officer Rodriguez handed him back his identification, trespassed onto our property, accused me of breaking into my own house, and called the police on me for swimming in my own pool. Sarah's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then pure fury. As a criminal defense attorney, she'd seen enough racial profiling cases to understand exactly what had happened. Are you pressing charges? She asked Marcus, her professional instincts kicking in. I haven't decided yet, Marcus replied, watching as Deborah Patterson was placed in the back of the patrol car, Princess being handed over to a teenage girl who'd emerged from a house 2 doors down. Mom, what did you do now? The teenager groaned, taking the leash with obvious embarrassment. Press charges, Sarah said firmly. This woman committed multiple crimes because she decided you didn't belong in your own neighborhood. She needs to face consequences. But Marcus found himself looking around at the growing crowd of neighbors. Some faces he recognized from morning, waves and brief conversations at the mailbox. Others were complete strangers despite living on the same street for 18 months. All of them were staring. Harold Henderson, the 72-year-old retired teacher from next door, approached with his wife Margaret trailing behind. Marcus, son, what in tarnation happened here? Mrs. Patterson thought I was you, Marcus said wryly. Apparently she's been keeping an eye on your house while you're traveling. Margaret Henderson's eyes went wide with horror. Oh my goodness. Harold, that awful woman has been harassing us for months about our security concerns. I had no idea. She was watching the whole neighborhood like some kind of racist vigilante, Sarah supplied helpfully. I was going to say busybody, but that works too, Margaret said, her cheeks flushing pink. More neighbors approached. Tom and Linda Garcia from across the street, the young family with twin toddlers from the corner house, even old Mr. Peterson, who usually never left his garage workshop. We saw everything from our window, Linda Garcia said, shaking her head. We've been meaning to introduce ourselves properly since you moved in, but life gets so busy. I'm just horrified that this happened to you. Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions washing over him. Part of him was touched by the support, but another part wondered why it had taken a crisis for his neighbors to actually speak to him. He'd been living here for 1.5 years, and some of these people had never made eye contact, let alone introduced themselves. Officer Rodriguez approached with his incident report. Mr. Williams, Mrs. Patterson has been charged with criminal trespass, filing a false police report, and disturbing the peace. If you decide to press additional charges for harassment or discrimination, you'll need to come down to the station to file a formal complaint. What happens to her now? Marcus asked. She'll be processed and likely released on her own recognizance pending a court date. Given that she owns property in the area, she's not considered a flight risk. Sarah stepped closer to Marcus. You should also know that Arizona has pretty clear laws about racial profiling and civil rights violations. If you wanted to pursue this civilly, you'd have a strong case. The suggestion hung in the air as more neighbors continued to approach, each offering their own version of support and apology. Marcus realized that what had started as a quiet afternoon by his pool had turned into an impromptu neighborhood meeting. You know, said Tom Garcia, a stocky man in his 40s with paint-stained fingers. We've all dealt with Deborah Patterson's complaints. She's called code enforcement on us 3 times because our kids' toys were visible from the street. Said it was lowering property values. She reported my daughter's quinceañera party as a gang gathering, added a woman Marcus didn't recognize. The police came and found 15 teenage girls in pink dresses eating cake. Wait, Harold up, Henderson said, looking thoughtful. Is she the one who keeps leaving those passive-aggressive notes about parking? I found one on my windshield last week complaining that my truck was 2 inches over the acceptable boundary line. As the stories poured out, Marcus realized that Deborah Patterson had been terrorizing the entire neighborhood, but he was apparently the first person she'd actually called the police on, the first person she'd seen as enough of a threat to warrant law enforcement. She's been doing this to everyone, Marcus said slowly, but I'm the one she saw as dangerous enough to have arrested. The uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes. Sarah squeezed his hand. So what do you want to do? Marcus looked around at his neighbors, people he'd waved to for months without really knowing, people who were now rallying around him after a stranger had tried to have him arrested in his own backyard. He thought about all the other black families who might move into the neighborhood, all the other people who might face Deborah Patterson's twisted sense of community watch. I'm pressing charges, he decided. All of them. A small cheer went up from the gathered neighbors. Harold Henderson stepped forward and extended his weathered hand. Marcus, I want you to know that most of us aren't like her. I'm embarrassed it took something like this for us to really introduce ourselves, but I hope we can be better neighbors going forward. Marcus shook the older man's hand, feeling something shift in the dynamic of Sagebrush Lane. I'd like that. Harold, I really would. Officer Rodriguez nodded approvingly. We'll need you to come down to the station sometime this week to complete the paperwork. And Mr. Williams, for what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to go through this. As the police cars pulled away and the neighbors began to disperse, Marcus found himself standing in his backyard with Sarah, looking at his pool where this whole mess had started. The water was still and peaceful again, reflecting the Arizona sky like nothing had ever happened. So, Sarah said, wrapping her arms around him, still want to grill those steaks? By Sunday morning, Marcus Williams was famous in all the wrong ways. He woke up to his phone buzzing like an angry hornet's nest. 17 missed calls, 43 text messages, and notifications from social media apps he barely used. Sarah was already awake beside him, scrolling through her laptop with an expression that mixed fascination and horror. Babe, she said without looking up, you need to see this. The video was grainy but clear enough. Shot from the Garcia family's upstairs window, it captured the entire confrontation from the moment Deborah Patterson had cornered him by the pool to her dramatic arrest. Someone had posted it to TikTok with the caption, Karen calls cops on black man. Swimming in his own pool. Pool Patrol Karen. Scottsdale Karen. Audacity level 100. In less than 24 hours, it had been viewed 2.3 million times. Oh, God, Marcus groaned, covering his face with his hands. This is not what I wanted. The video had exploded across every platform. Twitter threads dissected every moment of the confrontation. Instagram stories shared screenshots with fire emojis. Even LinkedIn had think pieces about racial profiling in suburban America. The comments ranged from supportive to outraged to disturbingly racist. Marcus's phone rang, an unknown number with a 602 area code. Mr. Williams, this is Janet Morrison from Channel 12 News. We'd love to interview you about yesterday's incident. Could we set up a time to talk? He hung up without responding. 2 minutes later, another call, this time from Channel 5, then a producer from a national morning show, then someone claiming to represent a documentary filmmaker. How did they get my number? Marcus asked, staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. Public records, Sarah replied grimly. Property ownership, voter registration. It's all available if you know where to look. She paused her scrolling. There's something else. Multiple people recorded yesterday, not just the Garcias. Someone got footage of Deborah being arrested and she's not handling the attention well. Sarah turned her laptop around. A new video showed Deborah Patterson at what appeared to be her front door, screaming at reporters while Princess barked in the background. Her hair was disheveled, her face red and swollen from crying. "I was protecting the neighborhood," she shrieked at the cameras. "You people don't understand what it's like to watch property values plummet because certain elements move in. I pay taxes. I have rights." Each word only made her look worse. The comments on this video were even more brutal than the ones on Marcus's pool footage. "She's digging her own grave," Sarah observed. "Every time she opens her mouth, she makes it worse." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor, Harold Henderson. "Son, reporters are camped outside. Margaret and I would be happy to have you and Sarah come over for coffee through the back gate if you want to avoid them." Looking out his front window, Marcus could see 3 news vans parked on Sagebrush Lane. Reporters and camera crews clustered on the sidewalk like vultures. "This is insane," he muttered. "All I wanted to do was swim in my pool." But as the day wore on, something unexpected began to happen. The story wasn't just about one racist neighbor anymore. It was becoming a catalyst for bigger conversations. Athrea,